Sagar, I think we can start. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Shagor Dash. I'm a postgraduate student at the Department of English at Presidency University, Kolkata. This session is titled Anticasteism and the Novel. This is parallel session number 20. It will be chaired by Dr. Mohammad Monirul Islam. Uh, Dr. Mohammad Monirul Islam is the Assistant Professor of English at Presidency University, Kolkata. His primary interest lies in tracing the eastern roots of British Romanticism. Recently, his monograph Oriental Wells, The Early Romantic Poets and Their Eastern Muse, has been published from Bloomsbury Academic. Another key area of his work concerns the posthuman. He is a founder member of the Indian Posthuman Network and is currently working on a collaborative book project on India and posthumanism with colleagues from India and abroad. He has also developed an interest in minor literatures, and he is presently editing a collection of short stories in translations by Bengali Muslims. Other areas of his interest are travel writing, pilgrimage, and walkability studies. Over to you, sir.
Okay, so thank you, Sagar, for your brief introduction. And once again, good noon to all of you, and welcome to this session of the Conference on Anticasteism. Okay, now we have, I think, four presenters here today. Mr. Mohammad Jashim Uddin from University in Dhaka, Bangladesh. We have Atolanto Ghoshal, who is doing his MA currently from DU. So welcome Atolanto, welcome Mr. Jashim Uddin. We have also Arpita Dutta, who is also pursuing her master's and is okay. She is currently self-employed. Okay. So and we have Vikaskumar, Revabhai, Solanki. So what we'll do, I think we'll have the presentations in the sequence that the names are given. Okay. So and after all the presentations are done, we'll have the Q&A session. So perhaps you all know that you have 20 minutes for the presentation, and then only we'll have some time left for the question answer. So I just request you to keep within the time limit. So please don't exceed the time limit, because I think the discussion that will follow after your papers is very important for all of us here. So let us start with then Mr. Jashim Uddin. Let me briefly introduce Mr. Jashim Uddin. Mohammad Jashim Uddin is an assistant professor, and he's also the head of the department at Northern University, Bangladesh, Dhaka. He is interested in writing post-colonialism, feminism, folklore, subaltern studies, and modern literary theories. He has also written a good number of academic papers and presented them in different national and international conferences, as well as published them in journals. He also regularly contributes to the national and the international magazines and newspapers. Mr. Jashim Uddin will be speaking today on Dalit people, race and resistance in the selected novels of Harishankar Jaladas. In fact, we are very eager to listen to Mr. Jashim Uddin, who is from Bangladesh, because we will have the opportunity to learn about the kind of, Dalit studies or that are going on currently in our neighboring country. Okay. He also had mentioned race in my introduction. That was provided by Sagar. I mean, about me, you saw that I don't have, anything worth mentioning when it comes to the Dalit studies. But what I'm interested in, and I have also written some papers on, is the intersection of race, caste, and religion. So personally, I'm also looking at the papers of this session, including the paper by Mr. Jashim Uddin. So without any further ado, let us give the microphone over to Mr. Mohammad Jashim Uddin, and let us start the business for this session. Once again, welcoming you, Mr. Jashim Uddin. It's over to you.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity to present a paper on Dalit people, race and resistance in the selected novels of Harishankar Jaladas. So this is the portrayal of Harishankar Jaladas. He is a very famous Dalit writer in Bangladesh. Harishankar Jaladas is a promising Bangladeshi author. The most significant point to notice is that all the novels produced from Harishankar's pen sketch the life of the downtrodden, some of whom are from fisher folks, some from prostitutes, and some other are the horizons or methods. Not only is he engaged in creative works, but he is also a passionate and academic researcher of the way of the life and the socio-cultural conditions of the subaltern fisher folk. The author having his PhD on, quote, river-based Bangla novels and fishermen's life, unquote, in 1982 from the University of Chittagong. It is mentioned that while he had completed his PhD from the University of Chittagong, and he had engaged in his teaching profession, but he had followed that. He has noticed that his colleagues, his students frequently called him Jaula or Jaular Pola, and a son of a fisherman is a teacher. Such kinds of slang words they have used. As a result, he started working to know about the life history of the Jaladas, of the fisher folks, prostitutes, and matter of the origins. While he was 54 years old, he started writing his creative writings, and by this time he has written almost 22 novels and 4 short story collections. Just here I have shown some book covers, and I have I will focus on 4 texts of him. So this is the structure of my research: introduction, objectives, methodology, Dalit literature and subaltern studies, race, caste and discrimination, alienation and economic exploitation, voicing the voiceless, and conclusion. In introduction, we say, as an inhabitant of the real Harishankar, quote, Harishankar Jaladas has aptly presented the local scenario and the panorama of culture, social milieu, political and economic dimensions, language, and the interactions of the people, which perfectly corroborates the novel with regional characters, unquote. His novels are the true reflections of the marginalized people, especially origin, method, jele, prostitute, and so on communities. So Jaladas's larger authorial engagement predominantly takes lower caste people in his literary purview. His portrayal of the life of the marginalized becomes vivid and alive in the novels Jalaputra, Dahankal, Sons of the Sea, Kashbi, Mohana, Ramgolam, and the other 10 novels. More importantly, his fictional works narrativizing the life and the livelihood of the fishermen, prostitutes, sweeper communities have brought him much fame as a Bangladeshi Dalit writer. About the identity of Dalit and Harijan of India and Bangladesh.
Mr. Jasimuddin, I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you are, moving through the slides, are you, changing the slides? We can only see the title slide here. Okay. So if you are going on to the other slides,
I have already shared the slides. Can't you see it, please?
Yes, sir. We can see it now. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it is moving. I mean, it was static at a point.
Yes, I'm changing whenever I'm going to the another slide. Okay. Okay, thank you. About the identity of Dalit and origin of India and Bangladesh, Indian anthropologists and civilists observation can be pertinent here. Quote, in Bangla and especially in East Bengal, now Bangladesh, wherever there are rivers and canals, one can find the memories of the Namashudra caste. Hindu society has always depended on their agricultural caste and has gone to the extent of treating its members as untouchables and making them live in the presence of the village. Unquote. Besides the Dalit Panthers Manifesto published in 1973 from Mumbai qualifies all, quote, members of scheduled caste, unquote, as Dalit and Jaladas being a fisherman unquestionably belongs to the scheduled caste and so to a major Hindu Dalit. We know that Bangladesh is a land of rivers and natural resources, and it has been the abode of the Jali community for centuries. But hardly have we come across the life of the fisherman in Bangla literature before Manik Bangopadhyay and Advaita Vallabh. In fact, these two notably novelists in their novels, The Boatman of the Padma and A River Called Titash, poignantly depicted the poverty, hunger, sufferings, and exploitations of the fishermen. However, both novelists portray these communities as passive victims of all the socio-economic exploitations, and nowhere in their narratives is there any trace of resistance from the sides of the affairs. So I have set up three objectives. First objective is that the first aim of this paper is to analyze the religious and social conditions of the Jaladas and Sweeper community in the respective texts and compare them to reach documents to trace the sources of their social and economic discrimination. Second objective, the paper studies the representation of this subaltern group as not just passive victim of social and the racial discrimination, rather as political agents of resistance and change that from in the spital margin. And finally, the paper attempts to explore the identical and the cultural locations of the marginalized community and how this location is located by so-called marginal and mainstream society, and the community struggles for relocating their identity, culture, and rights as fictionalized and textualized in Harishankar Jaladas' above novel. So I will skip these things, the definitions of Dalit, caste, and subaltern because of the time constraint, even the methodology. This is the first chapter of my research, race, caste, and discriminations, which are analyzed with the text of Harishankar Jaladas' four novels. Through his novels, Dahankal, Songs of the Sea, and Jalaputra, Harishankar Jaladas identifies dominant problems and crises within intra-caste and religion that prevent the community from achieving vertical mobilization in society. Harishankar Jaladas' texts Dahankal, Songs of the Sea, and Jalaputra are informed by numerous instances of the inter-religious and inter-religion discriminations. For example, in Dahankal, the author informs the readers that Jaladas belongs to a larger subcaste called Kaivarta, which against consists of the two communities based on their professions, Halik and Jalik.
Mr. Jasimuddin, sorry, I mean to interrupt you again, as the audience wants to know whether you are changing your slides. I mean, we are in the introduction slide yet, so if you are changing the slides, the audience wishes to see them as well. Which slide you are just referring to when you are discussing, okay? So,
okay, okay. Then I have already mentioned that in Kaivarta there are two groups. One is Halik, another is Jalik. So Haliks live by both farming and fishing, and are economically better off than the Jalik, whose livelihood depends primarily on fishing. Though both Halik and Jalik are outcasts, yet discrimination exists between them too. Halik says they are of inferior class, they are fishers, They have no alternative work besides fishing. But we have a life. We are superior to them. We are educated our class Kavarto and Jaladas's Dahonkal, page number 25. So I'm going to the next slide. This frame of mind is further realized in the incidents where Shiv Sharan Das, a Hali, gives his daughter's hand in marriage with Kripal Jaladas, a Jalik. He marries off his daughter to Kripal Jaladas despite the restrictions from the community. Later, when Shiv Sharan's ship drowned in the sea, Nepal's comments that these misshapen God's curses for disregarding social system against intercommunity marriage echoes the worldview of the Halik, who have given the intercaste racism and status of you. Then in the next slide, what we see that in the reply, Shiv Sharan says, quote, "The boy is home. I am giving my daughter's hands in marriages is educated."
Mr. Jashim Uddin, you are only seeing the slides. We can't see the slides that you are talking about. Okay, so I can see only the introductory slides right now in front of us. Okay, that is the problem. So could you just
point, but here, okay, I'm trying to share it again. Now, is it okay now?
Yes, race, caste, and discrimination. That is what we see, right?
Yes, yes. So, in reply, Shiv Sharan says, "The boy is quote, the boy is whom I am giving my daughter's hands in marriage is educated," unquote. Unlike Shiv Sharan, whom prioritizes a man's qualifications before his caste identity, the rest of the Hali community views that marriage as transgressions of socio-religious norms. Then I'm going to the next slide. It is okay now? The same. Actually, the title is the same. Race, caste, and discrimination. Further, it started with the further. In Jalapucho, interreligious discriminations and untouchability strictly appears during the wedding ceremony of Sudaship Bhattacharya's son, when Gangapada accompanies a group that sings and dances at the different events as a means of alternative earning during the reception periods. The Bhattacharyas belong to the higher caste. Though the marriage ceremony has ended and people have already danced, the music group is made to wait in one corner of the country yard until all the guests have left. Then in the next slide, what we see, they are served on banana leaves, as it is believed that if the untouchable touch the utensils become served and unusable. Thus, after their meal, they are instructed to throw away the leaves outside the house's premises, and it is not the same food the guests were given, which make apparent the issues of double standard and untouchability. So I will give another example from Ram Golam, Jaladas's Ram Golam. Though they means here the sweeper community toil hard to keep the city livable for the so-called civilized people, they are regarded as the untouchable Hindu beliefs. If they touch anyone from the sweepers community, they will be cast into the dearest hell. In reply of Ram Golam's questions, Guru Charan says, quote, "We are a very unfortunate race. To the Hindu, we are untouchable. We are an unholy race. Not just our touch. Even if a Hindu or a Brahman steps on our shadows, he gets polluted. It is a heinous sin for them. They would be sent to Rora if, after trending on our shadows, they do not recite Gayatri mantras for the 100,000 times and fast for a whole day," unquote. This kind of racial discrimination ruins their life. They are regarded as racist and outcast. So next chapter, alienation and economic exploitation. The repetitive motive of education is symbolically suggestive of the need for social changes which can be brought through institutional learning that can open alternative means of livelihood for the Jaladas. In the novel, all Radhanaths, Bhuvaneshwari, Gangapaddas, and Gurucharan aspires to educate their sons and grandsons. This aspiration is directly connected to the insecurities in the lives of the Jaladasis and Method. Radhanath has lost his father and Bhuvaneshwari, her husband, to the sea. Every year, many lost their dear ones to hunger, poverty, and the tides. The sea brings their troubles like loss and damages of accessories and boats, and most dangerously attacks and looting by pirates. The author informs that those who survive the sea struggles for every day's meal. A baseline survey conducted by Action Aid Baseline Survey of 2020 states that fishery resources play a vital role in the economy of Bangladesh, almost 6.22% in our total GDP. It not only plays an important role as a source of animal protein, it supplies the 63% animal proteins each and every year, but also provides the employment 9% to its population. It is the second most important sources of the foreign exchanges, almost 5% commodity. Yet the Jaladas community lives in the fringes of the country socio-economic condition. Then, to express the irony of their life, the author presents regular situations in the lives of Jaladas. Gangapada complains about the everyday menu, which is often cooked leaf vegetables and grow near their houses, and he yearns to have fish. But Bhuvaneshwari cannot afford to bring home any fish from the small amount she takes to the market to sell. Such a way, and by these conditions, we can analyze with the remark of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. What they say: these laborers who must sell themselves piecemeal are commodity like every other articles of commerce, and are consequently exposed to all the vicissitudes of the competition, to all the fluctuations of the markets. So next and final chapter, voicing the voiceless. National changes do not have any effect on the condition of the life the Jaladas. Quote, kings come and kings go. It doesn't changes their poverty striking situation. They remain starved features as always, unquote. Nevertheless, says the author, in 1970, when people from the city came to a campaign for the election, they explained to the Jaladas community how East Pakistan is being deprived by the new colonial rule of West Pakistan. They promised that voting for the election, which would decide the fate of East Pakistan, will definitely changes a lot of Jaladas with hope. The whole Jaladas community went to vote. These events significantly reflect the present situation in Bangladesh, where they are sought after prior to elections, but are forgotten later. Changes of political parties do not affect the Jaladas. It doesn't improve their social and economic state. A research done by Indian Institute of Delhi studies indicates that Dalit of both the religious in Bangladesh have less power in politics and decision-making process. They have very limited access to organizing trade unions, electing their leaders for their own benefits, and chairing polling boards at their convenience, participations in political rallies, representing themselves as candidates, and any administrative units, casting vote in support of the candidates of their choices, particularly in villages. Near the end of the novel, we see that being tortured, usurped, and denied access to the sea, water, and being victims of rape, Jaladas are forced to leave their lands, their villages, some to alien places, and some forever, to settle in neighboring country India. In addition, the torture, rape, and the abuse faced by the Jaladas at the hands of the Pakistani army we see in Dahankal reflect on the intensity of racism played out in the name of religion and nationalism. What becomes started is that on the one hand and the lower caste Hindu are untouchables, yet on the other hand the young Jaladas boys and women are rapeable to Muslim Pakistani army. This insinuates the irony underlying racism and untouchability. So, in conclusion, to sum up, Harishankar Jaladas represents the identical and cultural crisis of the most underprivileged sweeper community caused by the so-called mainstream society. The empowered society dislocates the sweepers' own identity and culture by extremely othering them. They are othered through the disintegrations of their social chosen and deprivations of their rights and privileges generation after generation. They therefore cannot cross the boundary of victimization of untouchability and injustice. However, sometimes the community members organize resistance for their rights, showing their repulsive attitude towards the empowered. So this kind of ambivalence they attempt to locate, relocate, and research for their dislocated and violated identity and rights. As failure, then they show their attraction, another part of the ambivalence towards the society, culturally and political privileges. And finally, we can say that they want to become submissive to the powerful and even are ready to lose their own culture and creeds, thus being first hybridized as they cannot hold their own positions and gain the status of the powerful, and next they become mimic for the tendency of copying the culture and conditions of the empowered unconditionably. Jaladas very eruditely projects the facts of ambivalence, hybridity, and mimicry as experienced by the method community in his great fictional work Ramgulam. Thank you, everyone. This is all about my presentation. Sir, please.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Jashim Uddin, for your wonderful presentation. And it's a very informative one. I have a couple of queries, but we'll come to those later on. Let us have the presentations, all the presentations first. So next in line, we have Atolanto Ghoshal. Atolanto is currently pursuing his master's in English from the Department of English, University of Delhi. He has done his undergrads from University of Calcutta and schooling from Ramakrishna Mission Vidyalaya, Narendrapur. Atolanto's interests include post-colonial literature, partition and migration studies, metaphysical poetry, restoration, age translation studies, etc. Okay. Atolanto has worked with Immersive Trails Global, and he's a senior member of the cultural group Roddur, which is based in Kolkata. He's interested in textual explorations, and that is what he's going to do for us today. The title of his paper is Caste and Outcast, Casteism and Disability as Horrors of Post-Independent India in Real and Fictional World. So Atolanto, it's over to you. Please keep within the time limit. Yeah. So you can go on.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are. Atolanto, go on.
Okay, sir. Thank you for the introduction and good afternoon, everyone present there. And I will like to thank Presidency University, Kolkata for organizing this international conference on theorizing anticasteism. And now I will like to start with my paper. The title of my paper is Caste and Outcasts, Casteism and Disability as Horrors of Post-Independent India in Real and Fictional World. I will like to start with a quote by Anand Teltumbe, which has been used in the call for papers for this particular conference. Teltumbe has remarked within quotes, Capitalistic modernity, the Republican Constitution, neoliberalism, and globalization all have failed to prevent the persistence of casteism. Quotes closed. My paper attempts to examine from two totally different perspectives the plight of the people of lower castes and Dalits in post-independent India and the violence committed upon them. I have taken into consideration two totally different time periods, two types of violence committed upon the Dalits of two different Indian states in both fictional and real world. This paper closely observes the character of Langar in Srilal Shukla's novel Rag Darbari, published in 1968, and attempts to portray the sorry state of a Dalit individual in post-independent Nehruvian India during the 1960s. The challenges faced by Langar as a disabled individual are put forward by the society in the form of psychological oppression. On the other hand, I have tried to trace the events of the infamous Khairlanji murders of 2006 to show the physical violence committed upon the Dalits even after nearly 60 years of independence. This paper attempts to show that the type of oppression and the place of occurrence may change, but the Dalits mostly stay at the receiving end of violence. In Fundamental Principles of Disability, published by the Union of the Physically Impaired Against Segregation, 1976, it is stated, I will quote, "It is society which disables physically impaired people. Disability is something imposed on top of our impairments by the way we are unnecessarily isolated and excluded from full participation in society." Quotes closed. Disability adds a new dimension of horror to the horrible system of casteism in post-independent India. The real and fictional world can be connected by using the element of disability. Shukla's fictional character, Langar, gets his name as well as his identity for being disabled. The society treats him as an outcast for not just being a Dalit, but his disability constitutes his identity, as the novel mentions within quotes. People called him Langar, the lame one, quotes closed. On the other hand, Sudhir, one of the victims of the Khairlanji murders, was partially vision impaired, which made him an easy prey for the lynching mob. Srilal Shukla situates Langar in an imaginary village of Uttar Pradesh, Shivpalganj, which has been used as a microcosm of Nehruvian rural India in Rag Darbari. As a bureaucrat, Shukla has seen Uttar Pradesh and rural India from close vicinity and has applied his knowledge and experience to capture the negativities of casteism. Caste politics became important in India after independence, and especially caste is still an important factor in the electoral politics of Uttar Pradesh. After independence, Indian government introduced caste-based reservation, but rural India mostly was not aware of these benefits. The fiction shows the reflection of the Ambedkarite movement. It shows the attempt of the government to eradicate the discriminations based on caste, as the novel mentions within quotes. Gandhi and Nehru are not the names of castes, but the names of individuals. This is a simple way to read the country of the caste system, quotes closed. But the novel shows time and again that this attempt has gone in vain. Langar is a representative of the Dalits in Rag Darbari, who on one hand faces identity crisis because of his disability, and on the other hand suffers a lot for the unjust social oppression. The social model of disability shows disability as a social construct, and it refers to the forms of oppression, restricted activity, exclusion, and discrimination that people with impairments might face, from inaccessible environments to prejudice and hate crime. Shivpalganj excludes Langar from the mainstream society. He does not enter into Vaidyaji's darbar, that is sitting room, but always squats down outside. He greets Vaidyaji in the way, within quotes, prescribed in the scriptures for a low caste man meeting a Brahmin, quotes closed. Shivpalganj does not try to get rid of casteism. The discrimination is accepted as there is no physical violence. The fictional village does not care about Article 17 of Indian Constitution, which states the abolition of untouchability and announces the enforcement of any disability arising out of untouchability as an offense. Shivpalganj has a separate quarter of the village named Chamrahi, where the Dalits live. The landlord used the Dalits' muscle power, but they remain there as outcasts. People like Langar, who cannot help with their muscle power, have no place. Shukla satirically showed how, in spite of having the Gandhi platform as a symbol of coexistence, the conditions of the Dalits have not changed in Shivpalganj. Even the Dalits have accepted this system and they touch the feet of the Brahmins without any question. Langar wants a copy of his document from the Tehsil office, but he refuses to bribe the official for the same, and that increases his plight. He does not get any positive help from anyone, and in spite of visiting the office multiple times, he does not get his copy. He leaves his home for a long time so that he can visit the office regularly, but he ultimately falls ill and misses the date. The local administration does not provide any facility to Langar in spite of his disability, and clearly his disability adds an extra burden on his Dalit identity. Langar's case totally supports the social model of disability, as Michael Oliver mentions in Understanding Disability, within quotes. It was not impairment that was the main cause of the social exclusion of disabled people, but the way society responded to the people with impairments, quotes closed. Rag Darbari focuses on the issues regarding caste discrimination and disability, ironically and satirically. But the plight of Langar is prominent, who suffers the most in the novel. He tries to conceal his tears, but within quotes, Ruppan and Rangnath saw he was crying, quotes closed. The mental and psychological oppression on a Dalit individual in the fictional world changes its form in the real world and turns out as physical violence on the Dalits. The shameful incident of Khairlanji murders tracks the event of physical violence on the Dalits in a place which was considered as one of the fortresses of Ambedkarite movement. 4 members of Bhatmange family were brutally killed by the lynching mob in Khairlanji district of Maharashtra in 2006. I would not go into the details of this incident as that is mostly known, but I will highlight certain facts. As a Dalit family, Bhatmanges overcame their economic hardship and became financially stable. Bhaiyalal Bhatmange and his wife Surekha managed the family quite well in spite of suffering from casteism. Teltumbe has pointed out, within quotes, Surekha Bhatmange was an archetypal Ambedkarite woman, socially conscious, intolerant of injustice, courageous and outspoken, quotes closed. The family was conscious about education and lifestyle, and unlike the Dalits of Shivpalganj, they refused to conform to the expectations of their upper caste Hindu neighbors, which led to physical violence and their tragic end. The Dalits of fictional Shivpalganj stopped touching the feet of Brahmins after the abolition of landlordism, but they used to show verbal respect. Nearly 50 years later, the Bhatmanges refused to pay unnecessary things like part of their land to OBC landowners. Though Khairlanji is a part of Maharashtra, the birthplace of Dalit movement, it tried to exclude the Dalits from the mainstream society just like Shivpalganj. The Dalits were held unworthy of modern living arrangements, and the Bhatmanges faced discrimination even in accessing drinking water. Unlike the Dalits of Shivpalganj, the Bhatmanges did not accept this discrimination and they had to pay the price with their lives. The wounded caste pride of their neighbors resulted in deaths of Surekha and her 3 children, Sudhir, Roshan and Priyanka. Sudhir was the eldest son of the family who was partially vision impaired, and he could not continue his education beyond class 3 due to non-existent resources for the disabled in Khairlanji. While his brother and sister continued with their education, Sudhir had to work in the field because of his disability. Sudhir's disability added a new dimension to his suffering as a Dalit individual. Even after 50 years of independence, Sudhir's case proves the social model of disability where he was socially excluded and had no access to higher education. Though the social model of disability gained recognition across various sectors from late 1980s, and a report was published in London in 1988 named A Wider Vision for the Blind. But the application of such models and providing facilities to the disabled people in places like Khairlanji was hard to imagine even in 2006. Being a disabled individual, Sudhir could not protect himself or his family members from the mob attack, and the women were brutally raped multiple times. Even the attackers ordered Sudhir and Roshan to rape their sister and mother, and when they did not agree, their genitals were crushed and mutilated. It is evident from the real and fictional events that the disabled Dalits are easy prey of caste atrocities, be it fictional Uttar Pradesh of 1960s or Rihal Maharashtra of 2006. Langar's not getting the copy of his document from the Tehsil office and the local panchayat's veto against the proposal of Botmange family's house show the inability of the local administrative bodies to prevent caste discrimination. Both the real and fictional incidents indicate towards what Meena Dhanda has mentioned as, within quotes, unmasking the unethical operations of caste, quotes closed. Neither Langar nor Sudhir got any disabled-friendly environment in Shivpalganj or Khairlanji. Also, the local bodies like the Tehsil office or school did not provide any equal opportunity to Langar or Sudhir, which violated their rights as citizens up to an extent, and thus they became outcasts in their respective places. Even in 21st century, in spite of the government policies for the Dalits, the Botmange family did not have electricity in their house. Teltume mentions in his essay the Khairlanji murders, within quotes, they, that is the Botmanges, accumulated enough money to afford to build a house. The village panchayat did not sanction it. The bricks bought for the construction were loosely stacked into walls. Cement was never applied, quotes closed. Even the police were not concerned with the violence on the Dalits. On 1st September 2006, Surekha first lodged a complaint at Andhalgaon police station about the ongoing harassment by the Dalit haters. The inactivity of the police became a major cause in this mass murder on 29 September 2006. In spite of being informed, the police did not take any action. Moreover, they harassed Vayyalal when he went to station to lodge a complaint against the murderers of his family. The first FIR number 56 by 2006 was lodged finally on 30th September at 10 a.m. The inability of both civil and judicial bodies against the caste atrocities are prominent in both real and fictional world. Khairlanji was not much different from Shivpalganj in the matter of using derogatory terms for the Dalits and disabled individuals. Langar old fellow, Changu or six-fingered Ram, Dev grandpa, Honeycomb Prasad were quite common mode of addresses. Terms like Chamar, beggar is in use in the fictional world, whereas terms like Dheds, Mahars, which are derogatory terms for the Dalits in Maharashtra, were used for the Botmanges. And they were in constant fear of being straightened out. As women, Surekha and Priyanka were constantly under shameful remarks, and the whole family had to hear casteist taunts and threats. Sudhir, as a disabled individual, was no exception. Though there are existing laws against the hate speech in post-independent India, but such incidents prove the inability of theoretical laws against caste atrocities, as the laws are futile when crimes are committed against the Dalits and disabled individuals in real world. Constant use of derogatory terms might create an identity crisis within the individual and also affects the psychological well-being of that person. Being constantly bullied by everyone, Langar creates a parallel identity for himself, which is definitely the result of inferiority complex, as he mentions within quotes. Now everyone just calls me Langar, father, but my real name given to me by my parents is Langar Prasad, quotes closed. Shukla satirically points to the bitter truth that Indians traditionally show their love for cripples and amputees in such a way. Langar accepts the mental and psychological violence and thus agrees to his identity as a Dalit disabled, unlike the Botmanges, who not only denied to accept such derogatory identity, but also decided to pay the caste Hindus back. Such attitude of the Dalits was not accepted by the upper caste people, and some trivial matters about the land finally led to the physical violence on the Botmanges. Both the real and fictional events show the involvement of power and politics in caste, which lead to social, psychological, and finally physical violence against the Dalits. Langar's constant fight against power and corruption can be compared with Surekha's indomitable spirit. Langar tells the story of his fight against injustice while sitting on the Gandhi platform. But powerful people are not interested in his story, as the novel narrates, within quotes. When he raised his head, he saw near him only the familiar dogs, pigs, and piles of rubbish, in whose company he had set out to fight a righteous war against officialdom. Quotes closed. The rural authority does not care about the Dalits, but they care about their votes. Election strategies are made on the basis of caste ratios. Similarly, in Khairlanji, the interests of Dalits became a political agenda. Local political leaders were involved on both sides of the violence. Few tried to support the Dalits, many were involved in the crime itself. The tragic event became a political agenda and multiple political parties tried to gain advantage of it. Powerful people tried to mislead the investigation using various means and became successful up to an extent. Even the roles of media, police, and medical authorities were driven by power and so were not neutral during the course of this event. Michel Foucault has mentioned a new kind of disciplinary power that could be observed in the administrative systems and social services such as prisons, hospitals, and schools. These systems of assessment and surveillance no longer required violence as the subjects learned to discipline themselves and behave in expected ways. The Dalits of Shivpalganj could avoid physical violence by showing such attitude. They never forgot to mention, within quotes, "I touch your feet, father," to a Brahmin, or never wanted equal respect. Bhatmanges rejected this power structure, rightfully so, and became praise of caste atrocities. The brutal physical violence upon them did not care about gender or disability. Women were active participants in the attack on women. By drawing parallels between the apparently non-serious plight of Langar and the very serious plight of the Bhatmange family, I can conclude that irrespective of time and place, the Dalits have time and again suffered in post-independent India. Be it the real world of Maharashtra in 2006 or the fictional world of Uttar Pradesh of 1950s. The mode of violence might have changed, but the conditions of the Dalits and especially of disabled Dalits have remained the same. The government has introduced schemes, but they have not taken care of their implementation. The prejudiced officials did not sanction Bhatmange's family house, and on the other hand, the deputy director in Rag Darbari commented, within quotes, "Now the children of sweepers and chamars are coming to study. So what sort of education can there be?" Closed. Mainstream Indian society has always treated the disabled individuals and the Dalits as outcasts. But a horrific situation is created when the burdens of casteism and disability together fall upon an individual. Langar and Sudhir are just the representatives of that community in fiction and reality to force us to imagine the plight of disabled Dalits in post-independent India, even after 75 years of independence. Here I will end my paper, but I will like to mention two incidents from the real world as the end note of my paper. Firstly, according to India Today, on 19th May 2022, recently, Bhanwarlal Jain, a differently abled person, was beaten to death in Western Madhya Pradesh. Secondly, according to the Times of India, a 40-year-old disabled Dalit, Chandrapal Yadav, was beaten to death over allegations of theft of wheat in Aligarh district of Uttar Pradesh on 20th December 2017. That is all from my side. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Atolanto, and thank you for completing within time. In fact, I think many of the participants here might have questions for you, but we can't take the questions right now. As I said, those who have questions, please put them down in the in-call messages in the chat box. Your questions will be taken up once the presentations are over. Okay. Now, I would now request Arpita Dutta with her paper to introduce Arpita for the audience. She has completed her master's in political science from IGNOU, and before that her graduation from Calcutta University. She has been associated with different educational institutions in Delhi and in Kolkata. She has mentioned Presidency University, Calcutta University as the places she has been associated with. Currently, she is a self-employed facilitator of French as foreign language. So very interesting as far as his career is concerned. She is also a translator of literary works and short story writer. Her areas of interest are comparative literature, partition studies, feminist geography, trauma studies, Dalit literature, translation and global politics, and its impact on India. So she is quite a bit of multitasker. So let us have the paper from Arpita. Arpita, paper today is on reviewing caste-based identity with reference to the situation of women in the late 19th and early 20th century colonial India. And the text that she has taken up is the novel Outcast. Okay, so Arpita, you can start.
Sir, I have a request. May I please be permitted to switch off my camera during presentation?
Yeah, you can do it, obviously. No problem with that, I guess.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Title of my paper is Reviewing the Caste-Based Identity in reference to the situation of women in late 19th and early 20th century colonial India. Matampu Kunhukuttan's novel, Outcast. I would like to start my presentation with a quote of Bipin Chandra Pal. Quote, "Our history is the sacred biography of the mother. Our philosophies are the revelations of the mother's mind. Our religion is the organized expression of the soul of the mother." Unquote. We consider our country India as our motherland. India is our Bharat Mata or Mother India. Our love for mother is reflected in Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's notion of India as motherland in his hymn Vande Mataram, written in 1875, where he states, quote, "I bow to you, mother. Who says, mother, you are weak? Repository of many strengths, scourge of enemy's army, the mother." Unquote. This vision of mother as a symbol of strength, which gave the nationalist movement a new impetus in the late 19th and early 20th century, is equally dominant in Abanindranath Tagore's famous painting, Bharat Mata. In a country where 330 million subjects and
Arpita, just sorry for the interruption. Please go to the next slide, I guess, Mani. You need to go to the next.
I am presenting my slides.
Yes, but it's not, you're talking about, now it is visible, the slide that you're talking about.
Okay. So in a country where 330 millions of gods and goddesses are worshipped, where the country is worshipped as mother, how was the life of women in the late 19th and early 20th century India when this notion of motherland tried to unite its people against the colonial rulers, irrespective of class and caste? In a caste-ridden colonial India, where apart from being subjugated under the British colonial rulers, its people had to equally bow down in each and every sphere of their life towards the Brahminical interpretation of caste-based code of conduct, to what extent women were honored in their daily life in a particular society? To get rid of the dark regime of this dictatorship, did people worship only the stone goddess? I will try to evaluate the condition of women of late 19th and early 20th century India through my presentation with special reference to the Antarjanams of Kerala, based on the novel Outcast, written by Matampu. I will also attempt to identify very briefly who is the outcast in the 21st century India. Matampu Kunhukuttan's Outcast revolves around the caste-ridden society of late 19th and early 20th century Kerala. Before delving deep into the content of the novel to comprehend the condition of women in Malayali society in that particular period, it would be a primordial step to have an overview of the caste-based identity of Kerala. In Kerala, Nambudiris or the Brahmins hold the highest position in the caste structure. Then come Nayars or the traditional warriors and prosperous landlords, followed by the service castes. Isavars are at the top of the hierarchy among the polluting castes in Kerala. Isavars are at the traditional toddy tappers in Kerala, At the bottom of this caste hierarchy are the scheduled castes. Subcastes exist for each of these castes. There are two major caste-based units, in fact, into which the society of Kerala is divided. Savarnas or the caste Hindus and Avarnas or the non-caste Hindus. With the course of time, through their supremacy in the society in Kerala, Brahmins got control or dominance over the lands. Matampu Kunhukuttan's novel Outcast depicts the social, economic, cultural, and to some extent, the political life of the people of Kerala in pre-independence era. Tazamangalam house is the most powerful among the Nambudiris in this novel. Achan or Father Nambudiri is the head of the family, followed by his brothers. The second brother is a Kathakali lover, the third and the fourth one are elephant lovers, and the fifth one is a great chess player, and so on. They are respected in the society because of their social status. Achan has 3 wives who are Antarjanams. According to the traditional culture in Kerala, a Nambudiri girl after attaining her puberty cannot go outside of her house, and after her marriage she is barred from looking at any other man apart from her husband. This appalling condition of Nambudiri women has been described in the novel as, quote, normally an Antarjanam who entered the inner quarters of her husband's house on the day of her wedding, crossed the outer veranda again, only as a corpse, borne on a pyre of bamboo after sacred verses were worshipped into its ears, unquote. Antarjanam means a Nambudiri woman who lives her life in the inner quarter or antar of the house. To maintain their chastity, Antarjanams were scared of, quote, the mere caress of the sun's rays, even when they stepped into the courtyards of their own houses, covered themselves with shawls and carried umbrellas to hide their faces, unquote. The women of Nambudiri caste were living their lives in dark and in tears, following strictly the codes of conduct prescribed by Manu in Manusmriti that instruct, quote, day and night, women must be kept in dependence by the males of their families, and if they attach themselves for sensual enjoyments, they must be kept under one's control. A woman is never fit for independence, unquote. At the same point of time, the curiosity arises to know about the Nambudiri women. Did they too have to prove their chastity? In Tazamangalam house, Achan Nambudiri, despite having 3 married wives, had illicit affair with his mother's servant Unikali, a young widow who was forced by Achan in this affair. The outcome was disastrous, not for Achan, but for the servant. When she became pregnant, Achan's instruction had put an end to her life. According to Manu, quote, let man and woman united in marriage constantly exert themselves that they must not be disunited and may not violate their mutual fidelity, unquote. Achan did not only violate this divine law, moreover he committed the sin of killing a woman. Achan's chess lover brother, Nambi Achan, too was involved in affairs with prostitutes, and above all, he kicked a pregnant maidservant as a sudden presence in his bungalow, disturbed him while he was playing chess. She died of this injury. Instead of punishing his brother for his heinous act, Achan rather declared to bear the funeral expenses of the dead and to offer a remedial prayer as early as possible, because it is the custom that is expressed by Matampu Kunhukuttan in the novel as, quote, killing a woman is a great sin, but if the remedial roles are performed, it will doubtless be atonement enough. After all, she was only a maidservant, unquote. Thus, the remedy was found in rituals, not in reform. The same Nambudiri caste men assumed the role of resident husbands in king's house in pre-independence era. Resident husbands were paid husbands who used to receive this amount on monthly basis. Majority of them had their married wives and children at their house. It is evident from the novel that, quote, during the latter half of 19th century and the first half of 20th, upper caste women from Kshatriya and Nair families were allowed to have more than one husband. Resident husbands were paid husbands and they received their amount on monthly basis. This system it was known as Sambharia. Thus, the enlightened caste men or the twice-born men were engaged in worldly pleasure. Their second birth after attaining knowledge remained merely as a social status to mend the code of conduct according to their own interest. The Gayatri Mantra, whose essence has been translated in the website of Chinmaya Mission France as, quote, we meditate on the Supreme Sun whose light pervades this world, moon, the heavens, Bhuva, and the next world, Swaha. May thy light guide our intellect in the right direction, unquote, became nothing more than a bunch of words to the Nambudiri men. They did neither heed attention to its meaning, nor did they follow it in their own life. It has been stated in Bhagavad Gita that, quote, Yada yada dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Unquote. Whenever there will be dominance of adharma over dharma, God will appear to destroy the evil and to re-establish dharma. In this backdrop of the dominance of Brahminical power over the society, supremacy of men over women, Bhakti took birth in Tazat Nambudiri's house. Her time of birth itself indicated certain messages to Chematiri Uddin. The Nambudiri priest proficient in reciting Vedas. Bhakti was indeed quite unique as far as Nambudiri girls are concerned. As she became Chematiri's disciple, she meticulously followed his teaching and asked questions whenever she had doubt. When Chematiri taught from Kathopanishad, the fire, quote, the fire dwelling within various shapes of matter takes on the shape of the outer covering. The same inner soul which resides in differently shaped bodies seems different, though it remains constant, unchanged, and beyond the outward shape, unquote. Among all the learners, it was Bhakti who asked the question, quote, then why are we asked to have a bath when we go near to Shami? Unquote. Shami in the novel was an Izava boy who was Chematiri's disciple. This apparently ordinary question had struck the bullseye. It shook the very basis of the caste-based code of conduct. Bhakti question reflected the signal of that incarnation to eliminate and destroy the ignorance of mankind. After attaining puberty, Bhakti marriage was fixed with Nilan, the younger brother of Cheriadan house of the Nambudiri family. The only obstacle for this marriage was that Nilan's elder brother Tundan was still unmarried. After Tundan's approval, the marriage took place, and yet Bhakti entry at Cheriadan house was stopped by Tundan soon after marriage. He had placed a condition before his younger brother which had to be accepted by Nilan as well as Bhakti so that she could enter the house. The condition was accepted. Nilan knew about it, but Bhakti did not have any idea. On that night, when she was waiting in her room for her husband Nilan, the person whom she saw in front of her was none other than Tundan, the elder brother of Nilan. If a Nambudiri woman looks at any man other than her husband is considered as adultery, then how could a Nambudiri man put up such a condition of enjoying Bhakti on the night of marriage, first by the elder brother and then on the same night by her real husband? As per Shankara Smriti, quote, the country in which Brahmin ladies are not chaste will go to dogs, unquote. If Brahmin women were following the code of conduct laid down by Manu and Adi Shankara, Then, through their own acts, they were violating the mentioned codes. Women who were worshipped as goddesses in temples became mere objects in their real life. The expression amme, which is and was often used in Malayalam in time of difficult situation, got confined into the linguistic realm only devoid of the social respect that was supposed to be associated to it. It was therefore the call of time to punish the Nambudiri men for all their sin. Pattikutti, in the form of goddess of illusion Kali, took the human form of power to destroy the evil. Pattikutti decided to seduce one man from each Nambudiri family apart from the main members of the other castes. She did not do this for physical pleasure, but to fulfill the purpose of the incarnation she had taken. Finally, when Pattikutti was brought for Smartha Vicharam, or the trial of a Nambudiri woman in front of the king, Chematiri, and the other Nambudiris, she had already seduced 64 Nambudiri men. She openly asked the question in the novel, quote, "You men who enjoy reciting Vedas and twisting its meaning this way or that will never understand life. For you, the routine of attending feasts and visiting prostitutes must be maintained. That is enough. Let me ask you, if this law of being faithful to one's wedded partner were imposed on men too, how many Nambudiris would escape being cast out?" Unquote. Pattikutti, this time too, through her question, bare the hypocrisy of Brahminism and the caste system. The intensity of this incident as well as the trial was so much that the king had to order for the first time to organize a Purusha Vicharam, or the process through which accused men could ask questions to Pattikutti. At the end, Pattikutti was communicated along with the 64 Nambudiri. Pattikutti is an imaginary name, but the whole incident is not a fruit of imagination. In 1905, the Smartha Vicharam of the Nambudiri Antharjanam Kuriyadatu Khatri is the source of inspiration based on which this novel has been written by Matampu. Khatri, during her trial, named 64 men whom she seduced, who were Nambudiris, Nayars, and other Shudras. All of them are excommunicated, Khatri too. In the novel Outcast, in parallel with the Pattikutti's incident, a brief yet prominent depiction of young Nambudiris who were in quest of ending the plight of the Antharjanams, apart from incorporating measures with an objective of social reform to eliminate the illicit affairs of the Nambudiri men. They too were shown the right path of their journey of social reform movement by Pattikutti as she boldly voiced her opinion. Quote, "You have tried to tell me about your progressive movement. Do not forget something. The foundation lies in the inner quarters. Please pay attention to that section. Do not be indifferent to mother, she won't tolerate it." Unquote. Pattikutti's opinion had directly attacked a very important notion of nationalists and social reformists who were essaying to distinguish between home and the world by considering the materialistic world as a domain entirely dedicated to male, whereas the home or the spiritual and traditional world was represented by women. Pattikutti highlighted the fact that if one has to flourish in the outer world, he has to first look into the inner world and bridge the gap between the two as both are interdependent. It has been almost 117 years that Pattikutti or Khatri's incident of outcast or excommunication took place. In between, B.R. Ambedkar's contribution in framing the Hindu Code Bill in independent India was a pioneering step towards building a just society. One of the objectives of the bill was the social advancement of women. Yet the question of the outcast remains reality even in today's globalized world. For example, in India at present, very recently, Inaj community has got the status of third genders. Earlier, they were considered as outcasts, but yet gay, lesbians, and the bisexuals have not received the status of third gender, and they face the context of outcast. Next, caste-based excommunication in the current dominant situation of religion-based politics are very much visible. It is lamentable.
Arpita, sorry to interrupt you. Could you please wrap up?
Yes, yes, please. Finally, I could say that yet like the lyrics of the song that we shall overcome someday, which has been sung by Pete Seeger, I too believe that there will be a time when the entire caste system will be announced as outcast, and the identity of a person, irrespective of gender, will be determined only on the basis of his or her merit. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Arpita. Because of time constraint, you can understand that we are just forced to ask you to.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, but I think you came towards the end of your paper.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
it was only one paragraph. I shared the full screen, so I couldn't see the messages. I'm very sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Arpita, for your wonderful reading of the scriptural roots of the caste discrimination, especially when it comes to discrimination against women, rather gender discrimination, we can say. Yeah, I think many will have questions for you. But before that, let us have the last paper in line. And after that, we'll have questions. So we have Vikaskumar Revabhai Solanki. So Mr. Kumar, Mr. Solanki, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Am I visible?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So Mr. Vikaskumar Solanki is a PhD research candidate in English literature from the Indira Gandhi National Tribal University, Madhya Pradesh. Okay, so he's researching in the Department of English and Foreign Languages. Mr. Solanki is interested in caste consciousness and resistance in Dalit literature. Specifically, he is interested in short stories from different regional languages. Today, he will be speaking on graded dynamics in Ratan Kumar Sambharia's Thunderstorm, and I think Thunderstorm is a collection of short stories. So it is within his area of interest. So, Vikas, could you just start presenting your paper?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for warm welcome. My research paper is entitled as a Graded Caste Dynamics in Ratan Kumar Sambharia Short Story Collection Thunderstorm. So I'll begin my presentation. The analysis of the short story collection Thunderstorm, which is written by Ratan Kumar Sambharia from the perspective of structural caste gradation in the contemporary context, reflects the various caste dynamics in Indian society. The author attacks social hegemony and the prevailing caste superiority in the society. It also proposes to change the social structure, which is an old and complex framework that modified human profession as well as human relationships. According to caste gradation, the work of temple the work of priesthood in temple is reserved for all upper caste Brahmins, but among an estimated 1.2 billion sanitization worker in India, them are denoted either Dalit or from the tribal caste in the waste management work. The quote is by Tripathi, the Safai Karmi, sewage sanitization worker, is one occupation which has been considered to be the meanest and lowest in the hierarchy of occupation. It has been the occupation of certain caste, which is the lowest within the category of scheduled caste. Quote end quotes. Ratan Kumar Sambharia subtly bring light on the multidimensional caste graded notion which are keeping human away from humanity, that has created social disparity and gives space to grow a notion of otherness due to caste based rigidity. The writer argues in order to establish equal social harmony to keep humanitarian value alive, the author highlights the caste based issue of underprivileged so underprivileged so-called lower caste over privileged higher caste and portrays caste resistance in the short story this short story collection and brings awareness to human consciousness against the caste discrimination and subjugation. Each character, in accordance with the storyline, has been portrayed from the self experience of the writer himself as well as experience of those other Dalit uh, people all around Pen Rajasthan by highlighting its unique voice of resistance that stands against prevailing socio-cultural uh, imposition and subjugation. Nagel question and quotes, how could it not be an evil that some people's in some people's life prospects at birth are radically inferior to others. Uh, Jude quotes Dalit literature as a short story novel, poetry, critical essay, autobiography, plays, etc., provides critical insight on the question of Dalit identity emerging as a social stream in the literary landscape. It tends to cover a wide range of idea and insight governing the social mindset of Dalit. It also contains a critical evaluation of the prevailing social cultural practice. Quote ends. Dalit literature plays a crucial role in eradicating a fanatical ideology that prevails in society, such as against discrimination, untouchability, oppression, and other multifaceted caste dynamism of the graded society. The conscious voice of resistance to manifest social equality, dignity, and self identity. Yet, in the contemporary society, with the changing time, educated class of Dalit community seeks radical change before the prevailing discrimination. On the one hand, and on the other hand, ages old Varna dynamism based on caste ideological notion flourishes in a new way to scratch old scars with the time shift and the implication with the changing time throughout the ages old Varna system to the contemporary time have not only frozen whole community at the social and cultural level, but this system has played a major role in the subconscious division of human mind, which has created staunch psychological impotency in the higher caste, which enables higher caste extremists to accept humanitarian value of so-called lower caste. Uh, Sundrita quotes, a caste system is an artificial construction of fixed and embedded ranking of human value that sets presumed supremacy of one group against the presumed inferiority of other group on the basis of ancestry and the often immutable trait that would be neutral in the abstract but are ascribed life and death meaning in the hierarchy favoring the dominant caste whose forebear design it. A caste system uses rigid, often arbitrary boundary to keep the ranked groups apart, distinct from one another. and in their assigned place. Uh, Sandita quotes, we may mention race referring to people as a black or white or Latino or Asian or indigenous when what lies beneath each label is century of history, assigning of assumption and values of psychological feature in a structure of human hierarchy. Quote ends. The story presents a key connecting thread to highlight various graded caste dynamics from a social perspective of the lower caste communities in the rural part of Rajasthan, while exploring the source behind the social distance and caused social disparity in human relationship that points towards the prevalence of graded Varna system and the sense of otherness generated as a byproduct of social discrimination. In each story have a specific viewpoint that brings forth a true sense of dignity by resisting against the oppression to create awareness and consciousness before caste hegemony. Author scoops deep down to magnify complexity of the graded Vern system. Allworth and Rosa quotes, the inferior comes to be regarded not simply as of less worth, but as a existing for the sake of superior. In a Vedic metaphor describing the altar of king's state, the priest and the nobles are the bricks, while the common peoples are the filling between the bricks. In the political thought of the Selve holding South planter merchant class, where the people for whose benefit society existed the Sparta, while the slave and the manual labor were to the social edify what Mursil are to house. Quote ends. It is pity that the ages-old Vern system still exists in the contemporary period, with the changing time change the way of prevailing the ideological partiality and equality and inequality in the systematic caste-based gradation. Defender of the caste system argues in support of the caste division of the labor is not an exception, but prevails. It prevails in whole India, but it is a universally accepted concept. Whereas the caste system has a similar base ground of systematic labor classification that raises question in those non privileged over privileged caste. Does that really plays an important role in order to establish a civilized society? But when it is observed with a clear vision without any judgment or bias, it reflects impartial view that caste-based gradation is not only division of labor, but it is also division of laborers. It's into uh, unique division. It divides humanitarian values. Uh, Thorat quotes, to the question what is right and what is good, the answer which the philosophy of Hinduism gives is remarkable. It holds that to be a right and good, the act serves the interest of this class of supremacy, namely the Brahmins. Quote ends. Thorat again quotes the attitude of group about the relative status and material benefit associated with the member in the group harboring the stereotype typical benefits toward the other. The extent to which the dominant groups perpetuate advantage for their own and disadvantage for subordinate groups is a key factor of group outcome. Quote ends. The existence of class system cannot be denied. It in comparison between class and caste. For instance, the division of wealth where some are wealthier than other. In a diverse society, the class system is not a man-made but a natural phenomena that led to the formation of two separate class on the basis of wealth, which shows that the individual individual ability and labor skill plays a major role in the development of one class over other. Class system has important parameter gives it gives equal fluidity to each class to move upward or downward with the which is designed in order to freeze the further development of one community from the those are who are the largest community, whereas Brahmin at the topmost position on the ladder of the Varn system. It gives them for one section turns corresponding disadvantage for another section, as by simpling the largest section from the mainstream society into the graded caste system, graded Varn system. Throw it again, one system different castes do an horizontal series all plan in which the different castes are placed in a vertical series one above the other and rank hold the right to education, the right to keep asset, nor do they have a community right. Brahmin are at the top who have more privilege over other sect. And subsequently, the place and the finally comes Sudra at the bottom. Those who are considered untouchable, yet one of the that has been thrown bottom of not affected their potential material growth, but also impacted their psychological growth. This the third quote that this raises a question: why does graded caste inequality still persist? What are its consequences on the access to source of income and their effect on income and poverty for who are placed at the bottom of the caste hierarchy? Patriarchy, uh, the form of untouchables. Quote ends. I'll begin my first story, Fulwa. Uh,
To just wrap up your
family whose son is a superintendent of the police department. Story begins with Fulwa's consequential encounter with old friend house. Hence the warmly and hence he invites him warmly at her home for a food as well to spend some time with the family because both lived in the same village throughout the childhood. Innocent Fulwa greets him with a warm heart, but contrary to the rigid feudal caste-based ideological veil blurred uh, uh, the caste extremist Brahmin mind, uh, it blurred his vision that he cannot perceive uh, positive, take it as positively, and uh, erupting joyly inside him, could not bear to see well-to-do, but he cannot see the well-to-do Dalit family. Thus, his crumbling feudal pride with the shifting ethical superiority, which turning hegemonic pride into shame, is the outline crux of the story. Feudal caste exploitative characteristics are still throbbing inside Rameswar since childhood. On the other hand, Fulva has a past experience of being exploited because just being born into a so-called lower caste family. The difference between Fulva and Rameswar is that the Fulva has left the past but has not left the humanity, and the Rameswar has not left the past and has left humanity in return. A rigid psychological character of Rameswar seeks to establish an ideal caste-based Varna system in society, which is a characteristic of Indian feudalism, as he expresses himself to party, a secondary character of the story. As Rameswar says, even if Fulva turns into
Because Solanki, please wrap up. As I said, we are already
okay,
going.
sir. I'll conclude the
Please do.
whole thing. Okay, thank you, sir. Ratan Kumar Sambharia's short story collection is a sharp response against caste graded uh, structure and its contemporary ideological extremism, which advocates human value and constitutional uh, uh, provisions of democracy free from any formula and rhetoric dogma. The story brings forth a neutral narrative texture without necessary interference, and author brings forward various caste-based dynamism, highlighting social issue and in the society that justifies the main objective of bringing awareness and caste consciousness against the prevailing notion in society. The story are mainly focused on the folklore of Rajasthan districts and it brings human value, a consciousness against the graded caste system. Uh, propounds an alternative formulation for the betterment of social equality. This formulation is not a formulation of policy, not a formulation of power. It is a manifestation of a sublime side of the main and the aggregation of the consciousness to lead the democratic life with the same sublime without creating an alternative non-realistic world or urge to consider that structure as an exemplary copy of original culture. Ratan Kumar Sambharia has put forward only a brutal.
Because
Thank you,
yes,
sir.
so now you know, let me just in 1 or 2 minutes to briefly summarize the panel that we have. So just to remind the audience that we started with Mr. Jashim paper, and he was focusing on the Jaladas, the fisher community, as well as the sweeper community in the novels of Harishankar Jaladas, uh, as marginalized people in Bangladesh in terms of their political and economic deprivation. Then we had Atolanto. Atolanto's paper is set at the intersection of disability studies and caste studies. And very interestingly, Atolanto talked about, you know, uh, the real as well as the fictional, discrimination and violence against the Dalit communities. But it is said that the visually impaired Dalit who faces physical violence 2006, and the character of Langar from the novel, So disability, as far as Atolanto's paper is concerned, becomes a kind of metaphor for the social disability of the lower caste people, the Dalits, so to say. So very interesting reading from Atolanto. In fact, I have questions for all, but first I'll take up the questions from the audience, and then if we have time, I can go to some of my questions. So Atolanto's paper is followed by Arpita's, once again, very interesting paper, and once again situated in the intersections of gender and caste studies, and how, women and Dalit women has been at the receiving end, how they have been oppressed, and she has provided very say with her scriptural references, the religious roots of this discrimination against women. She has provided a very interesting perspective, which historically have been, the impact of this text that she has cited has been seen all through history and even today. So once again, her take on the issue of caste-based discrimination, especially with reference to the women, is very interesting. I'm reminded of a lot of things when you talk about Namudari communities, the Nayars, especially the hegemony of the Namudaris in Kerala. And a lot of writers have written on this issue, and also, think of the recent debates in Kerala on caste and communal debates. That are going on. Finally, we had the paper from Vikas, and Vikas, have been trying to point to the graded Varna system and how it has resulted in the discrimination of the people in society. But Vikas couldn't go into the text that he was supposed to, because he took too much time in introducing the discriminations and some of the theorists who talked about this Varna system. It would be more interesting if Vikas could go into the stories as examples of that, embodying those caste-based discriminations. Okay, so altogether we had a very rewarding session so far. Now I just come to the questions that we have here. Sagar and Ritika, if anybody is asking questions in the YouTube channel, you can also copy and paste them here. So primarily I can see in the chat box two questions. Okay, one is for Atolanto, the other is for Arpita. So Atolanto, can you read the question, or you want me to read it?
Sir, anything will do.
Okay, so you see, Sagar has this question for you. How does the fact of post-coloniality impact the way the Indian citizen perceives disability? Okay, by post-coloniality, he says he means the processes and symptoms of referring back to the registers of colonial modernity, such as law, modern science, constitutional representation, etc. So Atolanto, please.
Firstly, thank you for the question, Sagar. I will try to answer the question. Because my paper attempts to draw a parallel between the real and fictional world, so I will try to answer your question by citing two examples from the real and fictional world, so that it can I can draw a parallel with my paper with your question. So I will like to take the point of reference, because I can see that you have put an inverted commas on the word citizen, and particularly so I will try to answer the question from that perspective of citizen. So my first example is from the fictional world. I will like to mentioned Rabindranath Tagore's short story Shubha, where Shubha is a disabled individual, and the story is set in colonial India. And we see that there is no reference of colonial modernity by Tagore, because Shubha lives in a village and there is no she gets no access to any type of modernity, modern science, constitutional representations, law, etc. And that severely affects her life, because nobody uh, discovers that what is there within her. Nobody considers her as a city. I won't say as a citizen, because nobody considers her as an individual. Citizen is much later. Nobody considers her as an individual, and she also doesn't perceive her disability properly. So there is a social oppression on her, and which proves the social model of disability in colonial world. And again, I will like to cite an example from the real world, that is very famous Malini Chief's life narrative, One Little Finger. We have watched the movie Margarita with a Straw, featuring Kolki Koechlin and Shiny Gupta. So there, the Malini Chief's narrative is set in post-colonial India, and there are clear instances of colonial hangover, because Malini Chief repeatedly returns back to England. Most of her formation period is in London, Oxford, and England, mainly England. And she particularly mentions about colonial modernity, law, science, constitution, etc. And she perceives her disability, but still she is not satisfied with the system of India. What we can see there is Malini Chief completes her education, her career education, mostly education. He earns 2 MAs from England, but she has to return back to post-colonial India to get a job. So we can say that the fact of post-coloniality definitely impacts the way of perceiving disability. Malini Chief can definitely perceive her disability, but there is a dissatisfaction, and that is because of the economic and social condition of India, because we are still much behind from the rest of the first world or second world countries when we are comparing with that England or France, London or Paris. Okay. And again, from the particular perspective of law, I will like to mention that first, the Persons of Disabilities Act was in 1995 in India, and later that was replaced with Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act in 2016, which includes more categories of disability, because primarily there were not mental disability and other many such categories which were later included in 2006. And the inspiration of that was the Australian government's definition of disabled individual and the Convention of the Rights of Person with Disabilities of UN, which was published nearly around 2005 or 6. So there is a definitely demarcation of colonial India and post-colonial India. And I think that we are still proceeding. Because our economy is not that well developed like the first world or second world countries, so we are repeatedly referring back to the colonial modernity which you are saying, and the fact that we are still unable to consider them as citizens, because the double marginalization is still there. In case of Shubha, she is a woman, she is a disabled individual, so the fact of double marginalization is there. In case of Malini Chief, she writes it by herself that she is a woman, she faces marginalization, and she is a disabled individual, so she again faces marginalization. So there is the fact of double marginalization even in post-colonial India. So that is my answer. I think that answers your question.
Okay, Atolanto, yes, we don't have, many minutes left. In fact, going by the time, we have only 1 minute left. So, Arpita, have you read the question?
Yes, I have read.
Okay, so please answer it.
Very briefly, in Rigved, we have said that fire is considered as sacred, and fire god is represented as a symbol of truth, representative of truth. So that's why I have created the background of fire. Since it's sacred, so we can sacrifice all the evil to that sacred fire. And I have also considered Paptikutti as sacred or fire, symbol, goddess of illusion or Kali. And that's another reason for which I have chosen that background of fire.
Okay. So I think you have got your answer, Ritika. Now, easy to just to conclude this session. I had a couple of questions actually for everybody, but yeah, let me just ask one question to Mr. Jashim Uddin, Mr. Mohammad Jashim Uddin. I hope, yeah, you are there. Actually, I had a lot of questions, but you don't have to answer all of them. The first thing that I was thinking that how far the use of the word race in your title is justified as far as the content of your paper is concerned. I mean, what way you're thinking about race. I'd like to have an illustration of that, but I'm not asking you to answer this. The second thing that I was, wondering when you have been reading your paper is the fact that you see when you're talking about the fisher community in Bangladesh, and particularly the Jaladas, I mean Hindu lower caste community, there must be, I mean, Muslims involved in the same profession as well, and they might have a similar socioeconomic status or not. I don't know. I'm just wondering. And secondly, if there are Muslim people who are, I mean, by religion Muslims, who are also engaged in the same kind of work, and whether they are any better off compared to the Hindu Jaladas community. The point that I'm trying to come to, I mean, you see, if you think of the Hindus in Bangladesh, then they're the minorities, okay? And I am in India, a minority, for that matter. Now, why I was thinking of this comparative issue between the, say, Muslim fisher communities and Jaladas Hindu fisher communities is that whether religion has any role to play in the caste discrimination, especially when it comes to Hindus as minority in Bangladesh. Okay, so could you just, if you can briefly talk about this point, I mean the intersection of religion and caste when it comes to this type.
Thank you, sir. Actually, you have highlighted the points nicely. First of all, you know that in India already you have mentioned that Hindu communities are the minority, and among them, Jaladastis and the civil communities, they are the lower caste or the lower caste people. And on the other hand, after the partition of 1947, we see that a good number of people from Muslim community, they had also been involved in fishing and other professions as well. But more interestingly, we see that Hindu communities or Hindu lower caste people who are doing fishing and other some downtrodden works. So we see they are suppressed mass, they are ignored. Especially, I have mentioned in my lecture that in 1970, you know that it was a election. There was election, and on it, actually, Pakistan, West Pakistan, and East Pakistan, they had decided to be divided, and we got our decision in 1971 to be independent. On that time, Hindu lower caste people were provoked to vote in favor of our country. But after independence, what we see that Muslim community, they were they were sponsored and they were patronized by the government. On the other hand, Hindu caste were not. It is one of the points. And another point, the text word I have read or I have consulted, written by Harishankar Jaladas, he has mentioned these issues in his books. That's why I have highlighted in my paper. I try to avoid the other opinion to avoid the contradictory in my paper. This is all about my answer actually. So I think this is enough.
Okay, I mean you wanted to avoid controversial issues.
Yeah,
that is it. What do you want to? Yeah. So it's okay. We get the answer to some extent there. Okay, I think we are getting late. Let me. I mean, I had questions for Arpita, Atolanto, and others as well, but I'm not going into that. We may carry on this discussion later on over emails. I think we have all your emails. Now, I just had a suggestion, say, or a comment or observation rather to make when it comes to the issue of the sweeper community. And I think two of our presenters have mentioned the sweeper community, Jashim Uddin, and I think the last presenter that we had, Vikaskumar. Now we see one of the issues that I have often thought of, and I think I have also read some articles on it. That you see, sweeper communities are engaged in what you can say waste management. Okay, waste management. So think of the way we treat waste, or say the way we treat excreta, say human excreta. Okay, so this I mean the connection between, say, our attitude to the waste, the attitude to the excreta, the attitude to something which was part of our body, but yet we reject it as not part of the body. So, I mean, a lot of discourses might come in here, but I'm not. I'm just indicating you. We might think of this. So this, rejection of the West and rejection or the ostracization, making them outcast in society of the sweeper community. I mean, how you can connect these two issues? I mean, the West, the excreta, and the sweeper communities, and how we might think ways to resist or ways to say rethink, reimagine our relation to the West, to the human excesses, so to say, or and how that can help us to rethink our relations with the lower caste, especially say with the sweeper communities. How, if we can rethink at all. So that is one point that I came to my mind when I was hearing you out. So about Atolanto, obviously, I would suggest that if you could, I mean, that metaphoric connection between disability and Dalit studies that you have been talking about, it is very interesting, and it can be further explored. I mean, in the sense that how you can theorize, interconnecting the two. I think you have given examples, but I think some theorization on the interconnection of the two, because you people are quite young researchers, so that's why I'm thinking of that it might benefit you. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so it's showing my connection is lost, so you can hear me. So, Atolanto, the other issue that came in, I mean, in your paper, which you have not focused upon, there is a third dimension, the dimension of women, the dimension of gender, so to say.
Yes, sir. Because of the lack of word limit and time, I couldn't focus on the women issue because women were the prominent attackers on women. So it can be a major issue, but for the lack of time, I couldn't focus.
I guess screen has been frozen, no?
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, sir is here. I think there was some network issue. Sir, you were muted.
Yeah, I don't know. It just suddenly got disconnected. So I was talking about Atolanto's paper, I hope. And Atolanto, the third dimension of your paper that could be developed, I mean, you can think of, is of the gender connection. You have been talking about atrocities on women. So the disabled, the lower caste, and the gender. I mean, the disabled other, the caste other, and the gender other. So you can connect these three in your paper. Okay.
Actually, sir, I wanted to talk about it because the women were the major attackers on women, because the women were the major accused. But because of
Yeah.
time and word limit, I couldn't talk. So I will
Yes.
try to include it.
Yeah. So okay. I mean, it's time to call it a day. So you see, we had a very good session, and the issue that we have taken up and the subject of this conference, obviously, is an urgent existential problem. It's not only an academic issue; it's an existential issue when it comes to the subcontinent. And in fact, we have some subcontinental perspective with Jashim Uddin joining in from Bangladesh. Okay, so and an interesting issue is that many of you who are and many of us actually who don't belong to the Dalit communities nowadays, they are also engaged in discussion on Dalit rights, and that's an interesting point for me because the primary step towards say addressing the existential crisis that comes from caste-based discrimination is raising an awareness, and this is something that is happening when people from traditionally upper caste groups are coming and joining in such discussions. So a problem that is persisting in the society, you people have highlighted that problem, and you also have highlighted the need to say address those issues and change the prevailing say issues of caste-based discrimination or the caste hegemony, say leading to other form of hegemony or supporting other form of hegemonies in the subcontinent as well. So let us hope that this conference and the conference papers that you have presented, becomes a step towards addressing those discriminations and changing the dynamics of the discriminations, which is a quotidian experience for the people living in the subcontinent. It's not merely an academic, not merely say a matter of engaging in the academia alone. So with that, let us, I think, conclude this session. And once again, I'd like to thank you all on part of the Department of English, Presidency University, and on part of the. Okay, so thank you everybody. Yeah, so Sagar and Ritika, hope we are done with it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Again, thank you, Presidency University, Kolkata. See you again.
Yeah, okay. Bye, everybody. Have a nice time.
So much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.